thank you for being here, Muddassir, and thank you to everyone who's joining this live discussion. So the purpose of this webinar series is to connect people and experts within manufacturing and supply chain planning. And our main goal is to empower manufacturing companies to thrive despite, as listed here, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, in fast-changing environments. This webinar series is powered by Quantics. Quantics is a best-of-breed, cutting-edge forecasting and supply chain planning solutions tailored to the needs of manufacturing companies. It was founded back in 2020 by a team of data science and supply chain experts, and we're currently supporting customer implementations across the globe. And we serve leading manufacturing companies worldwide with up to 20+ billion in annual revenue. And we work for companies like Mondi, for example. Muddassir is a supply chain maven. He's the founder and CEO of SCMDOJO, a leading platform for supply chain education, consulting services, helping businesses and individuals to achieve supply chain excellence. So he's a leading supply chain and digitalization expert as well as influencer. Check out his LinkedIn and Twitter pages. He's very engaging with his content, puts it in a very interesting and easily digestible format as well. And he's a keynote speaker at many well-known supply chain events. He's a doctorate from Lancaster University and 20 years of experience as supply chain professional for different leading manufacturers. And he's served in different positions such as demand planner, manufacturing manager, logistics director, regional planning and operations manager. So he has a lot of experience to share with us here today. Christof is the CEO of Quantics, and he's going to be leading the discussion with Muddassir today. So thank you, Christof. I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Muddassir, for joining today. It's really a pleasure to have you. As already previously told you, I'm very much impressed by your content, how easily understandable it is. It really helps people which are not from supply chain to get more familiar with supply chain. But on the other hand side, also if you're in supply chain, to keep on learning, stay informed about trends, and really progress in supply chain with the advances and whatever changes in the environment. And that's also a good starting point, I think, for the discussion today, to get your feeling as an expert. As Elizabeth told before, you have a lot of background, not just academic, but also professional in manufacturing. And we wanted to get a bit your view on a few topics in supply chain planning. And maybe a good starting question in that regard would be, what in your experience has shaped supply chain planning over the last years, and what are maybe a few milestones that occurred over the last few years? Could you just give us a bit of a feeling? How did you see this whole supply chain planning topic evolve in manufacturing? To get your personal opinion on that.
First and foremost, thank you very much for a very good introduction. Thank you for the preparation of this webinar. It's pretty evident that you guys have done a great homework on my introduction or the organization. So very well done. Regarding this question, right, that's a very, very interesting question, and could be a long answer, but try to be as precise and concise as well. So the evolution of supply chain planning is pretty much going hand in hand with the evolution of supply chain in last 2 decades, if you think about it. Because, I started my first job as a demand planner in 2005, right? And first time I come across a concept of S&OP in 2008, when some people from USA come to teach us. And in those days, when we were studying our masters in 2005 on supply chain and production planning, MRP2 was a big thing. And then they said, okay, now let's focus on ERP. So at this, which is the level 3 maturity, if you want to call it. If you got an ERP, that means you are pretty mature organization, right? And I still remember when I got my first job as a supply chain manager in 2010, and one of my favorite questions to hire planner was, explain me logic of MRP, right? Material requirement planning. And it was astonishing that doesn't matter, I interviewed a graduates or I interview anybody, nobody can really explain me the logic of MRP. Despite the fact the logic was invented in 1956, right? It's a pretty established logic, it's a pretty established grid. You know, you have your forecast, you have your orders, you have your bill of material, you have your inventory, you have your safety stock, and it will do the maths and it will tell you what purchase orders and what work order you have to create. And the only thing you can play with is your demand time fence and your forecast. Orders are orders anyway. And it was incredible that even with the few limited variables, people can't really explain and understand the logic of MRP. But then I think even that point, I had wrote a blog on supply chain or logistic evaluation in general. So if you think in 1980s, supply chain was not the word. It was like material management and purchasing. Then supply chain was born in 2000, around that, in that decade. And after I think 2010, when the cloud tech got into the place, then we're talking about, more digitalization in supply chain. We're talking about integration of supply chain upstream and downstream with your suppliers, with your customers. Therefore, you have now talking level 4 maturity where integrated supply chain with your end customers or with your suppliers, especially in last 5 years post-COVID, when the volatility is so super high. Another technology is in place, right? Where you can have a portal which you can link with your customer and then they can give you the visibility of the demand. Could be point of sales, it's a very good case studies there. And you can actually link with your suppliers who can give the visibility of demand and they can almost supply you with consigned inventory or just in time, right? That could not be possible, I think maybe 7-8 years ago, right? The best thing we have had in terms of planning integration was EDI, electronic data interchange. So I remember 2015 when I was supply chain manager of Warwick plant, we have a customer, Terex, which make big trucks and Volvo trucks. And we used to get their demand out of their MRP into our MRP through the EDI link. And we used to get into fight a lot. Oh, you change your schedule because they're used to an MRP in the month end because they sell or miss their sale and they run the schedule and boom, our demand goes full here, in a shit shape basically. And because our supply lead time is about 2 to 3 months, then we have to cancel our purchase orders, do the what you call it action messages in MRP to make sure nothing is dropped into a demand fixed time fence. So a lot of issues. But now this has all come to think. But despite with the technology, the challenge of understanding customer demand still stays. That's still there, right? And it has got I know you are a very, as you use the word, best of breed demand planning, demand forecasting software. And I'm glad to see you writing it into a 2 separate line because demand forecasting and demand planning are 2 separate things, totally technically, and they are not interchangeably used. Demand forecasting is a starting point of demand planning, right? So this is where my organizations need to get mature, regardless of the tool, basically, whatever the software they use, is to start from a demand forecasting, which is statistical number, and then move to demand planning, which takes all the input, which is the sales, marketing, customers, pricing, promotions, macroeconomic, microeconomic inputs to come to a consensus demand plan, and then move from that consensus demand plan into a constrained demand plan. So that's a separate discussion. The point is, despite the technology has evolved, the basic understanding of the demand planning concepts, I still think is pretty rudimentary across most businesses, really. If I talk to 10 supply chain planners, maybe 1 or 2 really don't understand the difference between the technicalities, right? That's first part. But having said that, now we're coming into this obsession of, I'm going to look forward on your question, is this obsession of AI or machine learning. And is a big selling point for the forecast providers. Again, even the AI, ChatGPT or OpenAI, yes, but it's LLM models, but you have to have a statistical model to create AI. AI can be only good based on what we're going to train, what data we're going to provide, right? So it's still very much into early stages of it. But AI alone will not be able to do shit, basically, right? You have to make sure that whatever data is coming out of your ERP which is the baseline feed into any software, is good enough, reliable enough to do any sorts of maths, applied machine learning or not, controlled AI, supervised AI, or unsupervised AI. Doesn't really matter, right? So that's I would say. So technology evolves, the planning has evolved as the more tech has come, which is good news. What is not so good news is the pace of people learning how to use this technology from the process perspective, right, is
Yeah,
pretty basic still.
perfect. Yeah, thanks a lot. That was a very good overview, and I completely agree, especially with machine learning, other technologies. When you look at manufacturing data, demand forecasting, and you want to have your forecast on plant, customer sold to ship to material type level, you need to have a solution that is robust enough to also deal with the data that comes out of your ERP system. Because if you ask a data scientist, beauty is something different than what the data is. So you need to have a robust solution in place that can
Yeah.
benefit from those advancements, but still has the capability to deliver robust and results that are consistent so that the demand planners can really work with that. Great, thanks a lot for sharing that. My second question, as you mentioned, now supply chain planning evolved very fast with the technology, different trends also from the market. And as you mentioned already, and also as founder of Supply Chain Management Dojo, you're very much trying to educate people to grasp those concepts, to get smarter about that. What are maybe the skills and trends that you see evolving in this supply chain professional landscape, and where are maybe some gaps that you also see in the area where people should educate themselves more?
Are you talking mostly in terms of education or anything in general?
On the one hand side, I mean, in general, what is maybe missing in the market from your view? What is the knowledge gap that you see in the market? And how could also education platforms like, for example, SCMDOJO help to bridge
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing we are trying to campaign against. So if you see how you end up in supply chain, I mean, you guys are data scientists, which is great, doing a good job in creating good software. But people like me, who is supply chain guy, who by education, by profession, spend a lot of time and now doing what we're doing. So when I was in the industry, I saw basically three problems which I'm trying to solve, which is all connected, which forms SCMDOJO pillars basically. I did a poll, and so I asked a question: how you end up in supply chain by your own conscious choice. You know, I'm gonna do bachelor's in business and do master in supply chain, or bachelor in supply chain, or by luck means you in finance or operations or industrial engineering, or maybe sales and marketing, and then you somehow stumbled upon any supply chain jobs because your boss said you're good in Excel, let's do some planning, and you
Yeah.
have no background. So when you end up, because you were good in Excel and good with data, somebody said, let's move into planning. And then you realize, oh crap, I need to understand reorder point and difference between MRP. I need to understand what is the impact of lead time. I need to understand demand forecasting, demand planning. I need to understand, the logistics, warehousing function, I need to understand how to do sourcing. I need to understand how to do the contract or negotiation, so then you realize that supply chain is a big science. It's a proper norm. It's a proper body of knowledge. It's not common sense. That's the first thing. And then you say, okay, I want to go and do some certification, great, all good. But when you look into certification, historically, the certification education piece has been, there's a lot of universities doing masters, right? So master is a master, right? Unless you are a lucky European people who can get masters for free. Not most people are lucky European people who can get masters. Even if you're in the UK right now on the British national, you still have to pay a fees to do masters of some sort, right? So only European people are lucky. So again, you have to pay around, I don't know, anything between $12,000 to $20,000 to do 1 year of supply chain masters, right? Then you got this Apex people who said do CSCP, CPIM, blah, blah, blah. Nothing wrong with that. They started in 1957. They started in the USA. They built a brand. But to pass a CSCP exam, but for me, I've seen the content is like a basic supply chain knowledge. And just to give you a test, which is not by learning, it's like $3,700, which I think ridiculous, right? Then you talk about SIPS people in UK, who's basically trying to sell the same old machine decks which they did 20 years ago into different wrapping, in procurement. And the only progress they have made in the last 15 years, they realize We should not be calling ourselves in Charter Institute of Purchasing and Supply. We should be calling ourselves Charter Institute of Procurement and Supply. So, okay, great innovation, just realize that in 15 minutes. But the supply chain has moved drastically very fast, and they are also very expensive. So I just realized, and which is a pain point. Let me tell you my pain point. So I have 9 people working for me. I went to my bosses in my restaurant. I said to them, you know what? 7 of them are just come from shop floor or wherever, blah blah. They are good people. I want to teach them supply chain. Okay, what do you want to do? I want to give them certification of Apex, because that was only available. Okay, what is the budget? 3,500 times 8. And it was like $35,000. And my boss said, no fucking way. No. Like, no. I said, it's too much money. Go and find them like some certificate which you can do for cheap, because we can't find money for these people. And I put a business case in. It took me 18 months to get approval for 2 people, which was even a worse decision actually. Because if you committed to 8 people that are going to teach you, how are you going to pick 2 people in? So why you even discriminate the remaining 8?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that's one problem I encountered in my real life, which people like me, managers like me also encounter. Right. So to summarize this, people from non-supply chain background, even from supply chain background, not enough knowledge. They need to get trained. They have to train on the job. And furthermore, now the body of supply chain is progressing very fast. Then we have to talk about the new topics, because everybody talk about supply chain digitalization, IoT, blockchain, cloud computing, 3D printing. But if you ask them, okay, which technology is more suitable to which part of supply chain, they can't answer you that. They don't know, because each technology have a specific application or a specific part of supply chain. Anyway, so I'm just highlighting the issues here. Then, for example, if I have to write for example, a business case of buying a new software. For example, I want to buy Quantics, right? Okay, I'm a supply chain guy. I'm busy. I need somebody to help me make a good judgment between Quantics or Slim Stock or Easy Stock and Stock IQ and Net Stock, right? Which is in the same. I'm just assuming you're in the same category, or Relax or Reflex, whatever the name is. And if I include board in it, so I know your competition, as you know, right? Somebody needs to help me to do a competitive study, right, and tell me which one to do. Okay, if I don't have a time, I can ask somebody in my analyst. They don't have enough knowledge. So I would like to go to somebody and say, you are an expert in demand planning, right? Can you do this little project for me and tell me which is the best, given my business case? And I'll just pay them whatever the money they want. I have small budget. I can't find anybody, because the only consultant I know is either McKinsey and Accenture and Bain, which are going to charge me, my house and my wife and my kids in return to give me an analysis, right? Second problem I encountered. Now, moving to the third part, I become a divisional supply chain manager in Eaton. I had 11 plants. I have a plant in China, and I have a plants in Romania, Germany, Europe, 4 countries. And I used to go to the plant and talk to supply chain managers. And they used to bitch about the same problem. Oh, my MRP data is not right. Oh, my supplies are late. Oh, I don't know how to develop my people, right? I have too much excess inventory. How can reduce? They have a different KPIs, even they're working for the same business. So I end up creating like let's call it operating system best practice for those plants. And I'm thinking, guys, you guys do the same thing for the same company, for the same business. Why use 5 different types of assessment or 4 different types of inventory tools? You all in SAP use the same thing. Okay, so then I realized that's a problem for most of the businesses. So if you see the problem I encountered of developing people, the problem I encountered of finding expert, the problem I encountered of standardizing supply chain best practices, there was no blood platform which was available to do that. So I said, screw corporate job. I'm going to do this myself. Hence, SCMDOJO was born. So what we do, we solve exactly all these 3 problems, but in a very simple monthly platform, monthly pricing of $99, really, right? So you can get all the courses, all the best practices, all the assessment tools, and we have experts who are our expert teachers as well. You can hire them on a hourly fees, monthly fees, whatever. I mean, I see Matthias here in one of the audience. Matthias is one of our experts. He's experts in I think transportation third party. He has written an ebook which we are selling. He's making some money, few quid for his coffee, and we are benefiting other people, right? So that's what we do, and that's the problem we want to solve.
Yeah, and I can completely agree. And it's like also all the big blue chip companies absorb qualified people on the market, then it's very difficult for other companies often to get those qualifications, to get that knowledge there, and to get it, as you said, especially at a budget that they have available and they can spread among their workforce. I think that is really also a key challenge that we see, and that's also why it's often much easier to sell innovations for best of breed technology to big companies, because they have the, let's say, more experienced guys than the smaller companies which cannot afford all this training and qualifications, etc., for their staff.
100% right. 100% right.
Perfect. Great. Yeah, then since it's about manufacturing, and then you have been working a lot in manufacturing, you mentioned just before, also, for example, you have been working for Bridgestone. Could you tell a bit about what kind of most pressing challenges you see when it comes to manufacturing, supply chain planning? What is maybe specific to manufacturing that should be considered?
I personally believe, because I worked in hydraulics, aerospace, automotive, textiles, right? I worked in different verticals, and I work with different ERPs as well. My real judgment is, and I probably think most people don't agree with me, or some people don't agree with me, I believe supply chain skills are transferable. Like how you do planning, or how you run SOP, how you do your supply planning, how do you do maybe your capacity planning to a certain extent, right? How you do supplier management, how you manage your contracts, how you actually manage your logistics operations or warehouse operations. The standard best practices are same. Okay, the format of Excel or whatever you do in terms of your dashboard looks different, because the oil and gas dashboard would be different from the aerospace or automotive or electrical, or right? Fine. But the basic KPIs of on-time delivery or inventory days on hand, for example, the cost reduction, time to ship, order to ship, is all going to be same, regardless of the product. So I personally think the type of manufacturing don't really makes a difference, right? However, what makes a difference is people who understand the manufacturing operations very well are better off in their, let's call it, supply chain planning needs or education needs. And the people who don't know the process generally struggle, right? So if you are into, I don't know, hydraulics parts manufacturing, the quicker you learn about the processes of, there's a machining and then assembly and the finishing, the quicker it will be for you to understand the whole planning step-by-step process, and you will be able to do a good job in SNOP or supply planning or demand planning.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for that. And you mentioned before also, when you had your wrap up about the technology and the evolution of supply chain planning, what kind of technologies can really help to improve supply chain planning, and how those companies can integrate those technologies? What is your experience on that? Or
Okay, let me
let
me challenge you slightly. So it's a two-way discussion, right? It's just not me talking.
Yeah, sure.
Give me an example where blockchain can be used in supply chain planning. You got a blockchain written on the screen, right? Give me an example.
I see it also. So we're not providing blockchain. I think it's also a bit difficult. I think in many cases it doesn't make sense. I think maybe tracking emissions, it makes sense, but for many use cases, I see difficulties, and also talking with other companies in that area, that it's often the adoption is quite slow of blockchain in for example, in manufacturing supply chain.
I've done enough research and dig down, and I have firmly come to a conclusion that blockchain cannot be used in planning. It's not even secondary tech, not even tertiary tech. It cannot be, right? Because it's all about peer-to-peer ledger, tracking and traceability, which has a good, I think, applications when it comes to financial transactions, or tracking of the country of origin, things like this. Right? Good. And I think this is where blockchain ends for supply chain. Otherwise, anybody who's trying to sell you a blockchain solution is almost like somebody selling you, when you get this whole spam dodgy messages of buy cryptocurrency and, all this buy Bitcoin and Dogecoin or whatever, which it's one of them. It's just useless. Now, in planning, actually, what for me, when it comes to tech is, which is going to use more and more, is actually cloud computing. Because cloud computing gonna get better and faster and cheaper and easier, which gonna help in more integration upstream and downstream, right? And with the inclusion of AI, it will help. But one tech which people are not talking about, which I think you're a data science and you can explain better than me, data scientist, you can explain better than me, is the how the database structure is changing. So it's not a classical MySQL, sort of database structures we talked about, right? When the things are used to save in tables, right?
Yeah.
With the AI, the database structures are different than what it used to be, right? Which is giving them much more higher computational power for the AI to add value to the human intelligence, right? And I still feel there's a surprise that a lot of people or the tech evangelist are not talking about how the classical relational databases will change into the AI based, databases, which gonna hugely accelerate how the computation and power will, make better predictions. So yeah, again, IoT as a good tool, talking about collection of data from the moving devices, but I think IoT can only help in collecting better data, and that's about it. Nothing else. I don't think it can help in planning. That's what I think.
True point. I mean, especially with AI, and you mentioned it. So when you look at planning and forecasting, you need to treat data like a time series. A classic ERP system does not treat data like a time series. You got already a lot of issues there. Then when you add on top unstructured data or other data sources that you use to train certain models, then complexity increases. And as you pointed out, I think existing ERP systems, changing an existing ERP system is tricky. And cleaning the data, bringing it maybe to a data lake where you can also enrich it and build on that different models. That's definitely also what we see as something that hinders adoption of advanced technologies in manufacturing supply chain planning. Perfect.
Very well said. Very well said.
Maybe to focus specifically on demand forecasting itself. What methods have you basically also been using in the past, and where do you see improvements, especially also focusing on manufacturing? Because as you pointed out before, it's like you can throw a deep learning model at the manufacturing data set at a very granular level. The question is how good will be the results and how robust will it be, and how you can handle that bad shipments in the data set and all the other cases. What are maybe your experiences in demand forecasting and technologies being used there?
Okay. This is one of my favorite and famous questions. So we're going to start with two jokes. Not two jokes, actually. One joke and one quotation. So the famous Warren Buffett has once said, demand forecasting tells you less about the data and more about the person who's doing it. Right? And I think it's a pretty good quote. Right? Or he actually said further by saying, tells about the person who's doing it and the culture of the organization who's doing it. Right? So it's less about maths, actually. And one of my professors came into the class. He said, "Oh, everybody's up at 18 years old." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, demand forecasting is like having sex. Everybody does it, but nobody knows what's the best technique." And I think that is also very fitting, right? Now, with these two analogies, I'm going to answer your question. I think, regardless of the technology you're going to use, forecast would be a prediction based on the data, some good tools and algorithm which can be as simple as Python time series forecasting, the famous exponential smoothing, moving average, and so on and so forth, which give you some good sizable forecast if you understand that which forecast model fits to your business, if you have a seasonal business or not seasonal business or whatever. Then you can use better algorithm, which says, okay, we can combine all the 600 times these algorithm, going to give you this. And then you say, okay, Then there's a machine learning models which comes in and say, okay, if you've changed some things in previous time, you might change it again. So let's, take it out kind of thing, which is also good. In my experience, I have not seen one single forecasting tool, which I've seen many going from very basic, which is time series forecasted one, to even Blue Yonder, which have the Luminate, I think they call it. I've even seen O9 as well. I've not seen a good application of AI in demand forecasting. Like, I couldn't able to see where AI is really helping. It will eventually eventually come back to the human intelligence to look at the output, however they are cranking it out, connexes or not connexes or whatever, right? Is to eventually, in most cases, export it to the Excel and make a sense of it. Right? It's just ridiculous, but it is what it is. Right. So, but what tools have done actually, what tools have done is given a higher computational power where you can basically do the slicing and dicing of the data however you want to see it, by warehouse, by product group, by combination of product groups, by putting some scenarios of promotions and pricing, and things like that. This is where the software has done a good job, right? I must say. But when it comes to the optimal forecasting accuracy, I still don't think a lot of people understand. Should they discuss forecast error, forecast accuracy, MAPI, or any other forecasting? I mean, I'm sitting down into a forecast demand review where, except one person who's a demand planner, nobody really understands what MAPI means and what the hell it does. And actually, MAPI is a pretty rubbish KPI anyway, right?
Yeah,
What I teach people, I start from basics, and I said, it really doesn't matter what forecasting to use. It just have to be good enough. What matters is what comes out of it. And when you see the data and you see the error, how are you using that information to improve your forecast? That matters most. That's the answer.
perfect. Yeah, thanks a lot. I mean, there definitely is a lot of knowledge gap in organizations about the whole terminology around the forecasting itself. And as you said, there's some islands in the company which are familiar with it, the rest is not, which makes it difficult. On the other hand side, as you explained before with SCMDOJO, that's also where we started Quantics. Basically, we saw that there's a gap in the market, especially for manufacturing data, to forecast also on a very disaggregated level best possible, and try to not just have a best forecast considering statistical machine learning and other methods and combining them in the best possible way, but really also integrating the whole sales teams, which are typically, when you have B2B clients, engaged in the whole demand planning process, and being able to really establish a forecast value added process and continuous improvement organization. Because as you said, one thing is you have a forecast, but the forecast is an input for a planning process. And it's also about engaging the company in this whole planning idea and making their life easier to really do their monthly forecast and to contribute to improve the planning processes. But thanks a lot. I completely get your view on especially also the knowledge gap within the organization. I think that's also a great opportunity for SCMDOJO, because especially there are many companies trying to improve their demand planning, but often it lacks the knowledge in the organization to really advance such concepts within the organization.
Yeah, I agree.
Great. Another point, which of course is also now very pressing again with the attacks in the Red Sea on shipping lanes, the question about how can manufacturers better be prepared to be more resilient in their supply chain? How can they adapt to a fast changing environment? And I think the unfortunate ongoing events are putting this again center stage, the whole topic about resilience. What is your outlook about supply chain resilience, or how this whole notion about improving resilience of the supply chain, well, on the other hand side, having the costs you need to optimize and consider? What do you think, how this area will evolve, and then how can companies stay ahead in that field?
I think this is an important question, good question. The way I would answer is following. Anybody who's trying to sell you, buy my risk analysis tool, is going to tell you when the risk is coming is again Mickey Mouse. Nobody knew Ukraine-Russia war. Nobody knew Gaza event. Nobody knew COVID. Nobody knew the ship gonna stuck in a Suez Canal and it's gonna cost like 20 billion or whatever it must cost. That's just not possible. However, what is important right now is for organizations to work on the containment action, because so that this I think there's a difference between uh, risk and containment, and the concept I try to fetch it from health and safety. Actually, when there is a spill happen or things goes fire or something, safety hazard, so their thought process, and I learned this in my health and safety training, they talk about how to contain the damage, right? And I think we should adopt this containment thought process that, okay, if any damage is going to happen, how are we going to make sure that the parts we are really buying from China or India, who is a single source supplier, if something goes wrong at the port and the ship doesn't come for next 2 months, how the hell are we going to produce our critical parts for our customers, right? And that is the contingency planning I think all organization must have, not in just Excel, which somebody has to maintain, which nobody knows where it is, right? And if that person goes on holiday, then they can't even find that, right? It has to be a very important document shared across organization, engineering, supply chain, purchasing, anybody, leadership, that if our one of the critical machine goes down, which produced parts, what's our containment? Do we have a second tier, third tier outsourcing options? And I've seen it happening. I worked in logistics, sorry, worked in hydraulics. What was ridiculous was we have a shop floor 130 people, and we only have three testers, three testing machines. If one goes down, our production used to go down by 1/3, and there was some days the two goes down, and we are screwed. And I always used to say, people, we spend so much money in a lot of other equipment. Why we can't just buy one tester? Just buy one more tester. Had a little bit or flexibility. And anyway, I don't want to tell you the answers I used to get, but the point is, this is what we're talking about, right? Is how we can think about the risk mitigation in terms of containment and contingency planning to make sure we stay uninterrupted in the time of crisis.
Yeah, that's a good answer. And I think it's also one question as a forecasting company, you always get, could you predict Corona, etc.? No, you can't. And what my answer is also always, even if you could, then in the next S&OP planning meeting, management would say that's bullshit. We don't believe in that. So
Yeah.
anyway, it will not be accepted until it happens.
There's some pretty interesting video of Donald Trump to answer that question. I will just forward them to that. Okay, go and listen to Donald Trump, and it's pretty funny. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Great, thanks. Now with tensions, rising interest rates, with other topics gain center stage again. But how do you see integration of sustainability as an important topic in supply chains? How this will evolve in the next few years? It's a big topic on many agendas, but where do you think also from educational perspective, how this will evolve in supply chain planning?
I'm going to be honest with you here, right? I have not done enough work and research on how the supply chain planning can help in sustainability. It doesn't mean I don't know sustainability. It's definitely a topic of my interest. Especially scope 3 recently, especially on the transportation side, packaging side. And I believe the aspect of sustainability in terms of supply chain design must be considered at the time of product development. Just don't go ahead and find a supplier or a material which is from the unsustainable sources, or sources which have social corporate social responsibility, CSR issues, right? So make sure you engineer sustainability in supply chain from the beginning. I've seen those studies and I've seen some interesting initiatives and projects and ideas. I haven't come across a good example or a project which tells me, okay, the supply chain planning has added into sustainability. But my simple common sense said, let me explain the common sense with the examples. For example, I do consultancy as well, mostly in supply chain strategy and design and digitalization. So I have a customer in Saudi. They have 3 warehouses, Makkah, Riyadh, and Dammam. So one of the common problem was their their cost of freight was very high, not because they're shipping to customers, because they keep moving the inventory between the warehouses. So they
Yeah,
have a wrong inventory at the wrong warehouse, right? Which you have seen the problem. So essentially, I've told them it's not a logistics problem; it's actually a planning problem, right? So if you plan your inventory based on the forecast out of DCs, right, then you have a right inventory at the right warehouse for the right customer. You don't have to move the inventory around. Therefore, you reduce your logistics cost. Therefore, you're going to reduce your carbon emissions. Therefore, sustainable supply chain, right? And it took me 6 months to do it for them, and they reduced 23% their freight cost, right? Just by better planning. So I think planning can have an impact on sustainability from the sense that how we can make right right inventory available at the right place at the right time, so we don't have to move trucks around or boats around to make this planet a better place.
yeah, no, definitely. It's definitely once you can set it up more efficient, then of course also your emissions and other resource usage are impacted by that. Perfect. You mentioned recently in the intro that with the internet and with software as a service solutions and World Wide Web and interconnected supply chains, that this is really one of the biggest changes to make use of cloud solutions. What do you see about the importance for suppliers and partners and customers to connect?
Super important. I think this would be the, if I talk about change management, right? Imagine that your 80% of your customers can give you a visibility of the inventory they are carrying, and you connect that with a simple cloud solution, right? And you know what they're going to consume, how much inventory is moving from them, then you can basically get the signal back down to your planning system, and you can do real time rather than waiting for the purchase order to come, rather than producing erratic demand which is going like this. And same you pass on this information to your suppliers, right? Especially for the A class item maybe, right? So I think that will take the whole famous Bulwick effect out the window. It will level load the planning. It will make the in terms of uh, making of the adequate order quantity easier, right? It will just improve all the planning visibility issues we generally face, right? So from my perspective, I don't think a lot of people don't know that. They know this, right? But and it's not that technology is not available to do it. And actually, technology right now is available very well, actually, to do it. Right? So the question is, most supply chain people know it, technology is available, then why it's not done?
Yeah,
That's the question. Right.
that is a good point, and
And I'm gonna give you example of my last company without naming them, but anyway, who's my last company? And where it's a political issue rather than a supply chain issue to make it happen. For example, Bitschnau is a company who sell it to a distributor. Distributor are the one who owns the inventory and they order on a monthly, bi-weekly basis. Okay. And okay, so basically our sales guys, their job is to make sure inventory, our distributors carry as much inventory as possible, i.e. place big orders to us, because their bonuses is depends on the target distributor had to receive. Right. Now, all good here so far. But the thing is, I deployed a software which is enabling, we call it's like Amazon of supply chain. So all our distributors can order online, see their orders, backlog, shipping terms. I said, if you just basically upload your distribution inventory there, and actually I can tell you what is your next PO for the month. Because the only thing is I just need their inventory. I know what they buy. I have all their history. I know my supply lead time. I know everything else in supply chain. I just need to know what inventory you're carrying. And I will tell you what you have to order. the first point of resistance is not the customer, it's actually my sales team. The reason they don't want it, because they do not want to give this power, because the only thing they negotiate with their customers is how much they have to order. And that is the negotiation point. It's important for them. And their bonus is dependent on that. So if I can do this part, which is how much customer going to order, and customer go, imagine a day, the customer going to go, I recommend them next month purchase orders, right? They're going to click, accept and add it, for example, right? Then this is like 50% job done of the sales guys. What they're going to do, right? So customers were actually interested to work on this project. The person who was super against it was our sales director. No, can't do it, can't do it. I said, what? Explain me one good reason you can't do it. He couldn't explain me. But anyway, I ended up leaving Bridgestone, so the project didn't happen.
Yeah, definitely. I also, from experience working in software service industry, often it's more political reasons why you don't engage with your first, second tier suppliers, etc.
Yeah.
Although it would add so much value, it would make so much sense from a supply chain perspective, but then it doesn't happen. Yeah, as you said, technology is there, knowledge is there, but the ambition to really make it happen is challenging.
Yeah, technology is there, 100% sure. It's easier to do right now. It's easier than it ever was.
Perfect. So before we go to the final thoughts, maybe some questions now. When you set up your process, and of course in the beginning it's a lot of change management to get it started, but then the question is, since everything evolves and you want to improve, do you have some best practices or continuous improvement in the whole supply chain planning? Do you have some experience which you would like to share, how this can be achieved, or maybe also some stories?
And I have many. This is my favorite topic. But I'll give you top three, right? The first one is, so I'm a researcher myself, right? If you study any management research, and if a research paper says X critical factor or failure factors, right, of any management theory, Lean, Six Sigma, SNOP, planning, whatever. Number one is always executive leadership sponsorship failure factor, right? And that could be a success factor. So I work for two businesses, right, of a very similar leaders, right, red leaders. One was very pro SNOP, demand planning, how to see the business, and one was we are just wasting our time. So it was very clear difference between the two, how they used to run businesses, right? So one guy, I think fortunately he was an industry engineer himself, gone to become a VP, so he knows how important it is to do the demand forecasting, do the demand planning, and then run the SNOP, link with financial forecasting, make a right capacity decisions. And he used to sit in a executive review. And for example, we used to have this issue. We used to buy a lot from China, and China used to have this Chinese holidays, Chinese New Year holidays, which they have in Feb time whenever, and the impact of that is that for what was happening with the previous 2 years, we don't used to have inventory in June, July, which is our peak period in Europe to have the right inventory for our distributors. When you actually, the root cause of that, why you don't have inventory, because we never really planned for the 3 weeks of shutdown in China. But they don't make. If they don't work, and if you don't plan for that shutdown, then by the time they come out of their holiday in April and they start producing and they ship in May, and so we are already late in June, July. Very simple, basic. So I presented this to the Martin, and I said to Martin, I told him in January, right? No, I told him early January in SLP. I said, I need to order extra inventory in Feb and Jan. So I planned the extra inventory for 3 to 4 weeks, so they can manage before their Chinese shutdown. So it will arrive in May, so we don't have a stock shortages in June. And the guy said yes like this, without even thinking. But he knew my logic was right, and I was looking forward, and I was planning forward, and doing my maths forward, right? And financial controller was looking at me like, no way you can have approval for this. It was like extra $300,000 of inventory. And it was not even budgeted, because financial controller always work around budget, right? Okay. Now, but then the second thing he said to me is following. Is in the budget? I said no. He said, make sure if you in your next SNOP cycle, when you're doing the budget for the following year, I want to see that in budget. So we are sitting in January of a year, and he's talking about budget of the next year. So
Yeah.
so a guy was switched on. He knew how SNOP works. He knew how to make decisions out of SNOP. So great. We work for a guy who doesn't even turn up to the executive reviews and demand reviews. And guess what happened? SNOP got dead in 4 months. Someone like me who teaches SNOP for living, I couldn't able to make SNOP work in that part of the organization because why? He doesn't turn up. The sales director doesn't turn up. Nobody gives the monkeys. It doesn't happen. So in this, the two example, what happened is the business where the leader is supporting the demand forecasting, demand planning, looking forward, making decisions. If you use a good tool, right, it can help you to really drive decisions to make better decisions to have the right inventory, right place, improve customer service, reduce cost, reduce the whole thing. But if you're a decision maker who doesn't give a monkeys, you can use the best of breed forecasting software Quantics. It will never gain any respect in the organization because the person who actually going to make decisions is not just there.
Yeah, Sige, that's very true. And it's technology, people, processes, and as you said, responsibility, being part of it, taking initiative to really live the process is very important to make it happen.
Exactly, and it's done top down. It's absolutely done top down. And you sell software. I don't know what's your subscription rate, who's the customer, but I can tell you this right now. In whoever your end user is, and I'm sure you can run KPIs of engagement and how many users logging in. You can be very sure where the organization leader is interested in demand forecasting and planning and the results of it and making decisions. You will see a higher user engagement rate versus the customers where the leader is not interested in making decisions on demand forecasting, demand planning, SNOP. You will see a lower engagement touch points. I'm pretty sure on that.
Yeah, no, I can definitely confirm that. And I think the whole traction in the company, if the leadership is behind it, the team is on board. But if it's just like, yes, we should do this, but then it's hard
Now,
to get.
yeah, and here's the thing. Here's the tip. What I've seen in the startups, and I do consulting for a lot of or advisory mentoring work for the software suppliers, software companies, and promote them as well. What happened is, I think, is selling the first year of license is easy. Second year gets difficult, and third year will get more difficult. The reason it get more difficult is the engagement goes down, right? So how you actually engage the customers who already bought your software to continue, and that can only happen, in my experience, or one of the main contributory is we we need to continue to coach and teach the customers to know enough, stay engaged enough to continue to use the software. That's a tip for you.
Perfect. I think that was also a good final thought, maybe from your side with those anecdotes on how to really improve it. Maybe something else that you would like to add to the topic.
I I would say following to a planning people. I think it's very unthankful job, which is very sad. And I posted that on LinkedIn. It went viral, which was like supply chain planning is actually the heartbeat of your supply chain in general. If nobody praises them if they do a very good planning for 3 months and achieve 95% on-time delivery, hit their days on hand, because everything, yeah, it's your job to do it anyway. I think doing that for 3 months is 3 times more difficult and 3 times more important for some procurement guys who just find a cost reduction of $100,000, who basically negotiated it in one time and sit down and just go into the database and upload the cost saving. And all the procurement guys will get a lot of praises, or the sales guys for hitting the target of their sales, and whoever gets IT guys for implementing new software. But nobody praises supply chain planning people enough. And I it makes me angry actually. Right? Honestly, it does, because I am a planning guy myself. And I think those supply chain people needs to be, or planning people especially, needs to be encouraged, motivated, recognized, rewarded, promoted right, for their good work, right? Because without them, the heartbeat will not work and things will fall. And I think the parting thought I would say following: planning people have an advantage over most other functions, maybe except finance, to have a good overview of organization, strategically speaking, because you happen to understand your customers. You happen to understand what customers behave, how they behave, and which part of the world are they? Are they export, import, local, and what, are they distributor and OE or whatever, right? So you understand the customer, how they behave, because you keep seeing the data all the time. Yeah. You also understand how your suppliers behave or your manufacturing behaves because you don't have parts on time, for example, or manufacturing processes. So by doing so, you get a very good understanding of the engine of the business very quickly, more so than any sales guy, more so than any IT person, HR person, marketing person, sales person. And if you develop your leadership skills or other three pillars, which is like soft skills and communication, how to deal with people, presentation, bragging about yourself is also important. And I think as a planning person, you have a great chance to to become a prominent in the businesses you're working with and working for, and increase your chances of employment to make more money and get more promotions. Right? Because I started the planning guy, I became a supply chain manager, then I started doing IT ERP projects, and now I can sell supply chain or I can sell anything, right? So thanks to all my good basis of supply chain, I could do all that, right? So don't be tunnel vision. Think about you are into like a midfielder position. If I talk about footballing terms, you can go back and save the goal and you can really go forward and score a goal.
Yeah, perfect. I think those are some good inputs for the audience then on YouTube to really listen to, and also for the demand planners to do the hard job all the time. Being wrong is not nice, but it helps the business to get more right. I think that is getting this continuous feedback, what is not perfect, as you mentioned. It's not an easy job in an organization, but it's a very crucial job to propel the organization forward.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure to talk to you about supply chain planning.
Pleasure is all mine.